we had to print money to pay the interest on the existing national debt.
Mm-hmm.
And the term that was used there was moneyballing the interest. And historically, when you look at other countries that had done this, this was, I don't know if this was I don't know if this was a fact that had no exceptions, or this was just like a very strong correlation, let's say, that tended to be stage one of hyperinflation for a country. Once they had to print money just to service the existing debt, it's, you know, the rough analogy is like if you had, you know, you had a $500,000 credit card balance outstanding and you had $100,000 annual income, and say you're, you know, paying 20% interest on that. So you're paying 100, you're literally, all of your income is going, in this case, it's not even your income, right? It's just, you're actually, it's beyond your income. They're printing the money to pay the debt. So does that factor into this collapse? Or are you just solely pinning it on the Social Security fund running out? Like, are there other factors playing into this?
The reason why that Social Security is interesting is because it's kind of like a cliff, where it's like Hemingway said, how do you go bankrupt? Slowly at first and then all at once.
Gradually, then suddenly, yeah.
And right now, we're not having to issue any debt at all to pay Social Security.
Yeah.
It's being completely paid by draining funds from the Social Security Trust Fund, which is just debt. Treasury debt is what's in the trust fund. It's not Treasury bonds. It's a special Treasury bond that's only sold to the Social Security Administration. But anyways, it's government debt. But between already existing debt in the Social Security Trust Fund and all the money that comes in from everybody's paychecks, we're able to pay it. And in around that 2030 timeframe, all of a sudden it's like 1 month, everything's paid for, and then all of a sudden, oops, that whole trust fund is bankrupt. It goes to zero.
Wow.
How do you make up the difference between what it costs to keep Social Security checks going out and the paycheck money coming in? And that's like an immediate 25, 30% cliff, where now all of a sudden, so imagine like all of a sudden, like you just never had a bill and you're barely, you know, hanging on with a bunch of credit cards.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get a new like $5,000 a month bill that has to be paid every month. That's going to put you in a world of hurt. And that's kind of this thing. Now, to get back to your earlier point, which I think is really interesting about, you know, when do these countries start to go into these collapses? So there's two things to look at. One is kind of declines, heavy declines starting when the countries are spending more on interest than they are in defense, which we started last year.
Okay.
And then the other one is, you know, printing money, you called it money balling, to cover interest. So, you know, the way I like to look at it, other people look at it slightly different ways. Like Luke Gromen will call it like true net interest expense, and he'll include entitlements with interest and defense.
Okay.
I like to look at it like what can't we really, you know, cut without like riots on the streets, right? So I would say like, you know, defense, Social Security, Medicare. I'd also throw in, you know, veterans benefits, right? Like we're already not doing everything we could for our veterans. And so when you look at those things and you say, okay, let's say we're not going to pare back on those, when those mandatory spends, right, where over 100% of your tax receipts are going to cover your mandatory spends, that's when the inflation, you know, kind of really starts to hit home. And that's where we're at. You know, we're at like 90% of tax receipts to cover those mandatory things. So you could get rid of everything else. You could get rid of the Department of Transportation, Education, Interior, Homeland Security, like all of those, and you're still running a deficit now.
Wow.
So that's where we're at.
And that's, I assume that proportion is increasing, right? You said it's 90% now, but it's probably up over the past several years and headed higher.
Increasing massively. Biggest driver has been the cost of medical care. And the other big driver has been actually veterans benefits have been going up a lot for that. And also Social Security, given, you know, demographics. And, you know, I think to cover this, you know, the fire and ice strategy to make it work, like there's going to need to be, you know, new winners and losers. Like, you know, the United Healthcares of the world aren't used to being the losers, but that's who they're going to want to be a loser in this situation. Like they're going to want the pharmaceutical companies to be losers and negotiate drug companies and try to protect, you know, that the Social Security benefits don't get cut back. So, you know, this is kind of the big fight that I think is going on, and the entrenched interest, and why the stock market might not like a lot of these things, even if they're good for, you know, the construction worker in Tallahassee. You know, we're going after, you know, some of the sacred cows in the economy here, which have been profiting off of, you know, all of this exaggerated government spending, and a lot of it has been going into the healthcare administration. Industry. You can look at the number of administrators that have gone up relative to practitioners. There's just a lot of fat in there, and a lot of people getting rich that aren't going to like it if we go in there and try to do something about it.
That's a great point. I mean, this is what it sounds like, the breakdown of the post-Bretton Woods era, right? The culmination of World War II is we had the Bretton Woods Agreement, and that's already kind of broken down, right? The 1971 Nixon shock was the first, maybe not the first, but a major step in the breakdown of that global economic order. Is this just the continuation of that we are now going to have to go through a Bretton Woods 2.0, like, or do we have to go through a World War III to get to Bretton Woods 2.0? Like, where's this headed in your estimation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could possibly be an explicit new Bretton Woods, right? Like, where it's not just backdoor stuff, which has already been going on. So yeah, we had the Bretton Woods system, like 44 to 71. Then we entered what is often called the post-Bretton Woods era. And now we got the breakdown of the post-Bretton Woods era. So I don't know, it's actually more of a Bretton Woods like 3.0, or there was never a Bretton Woods 2.0, but we moved into something else. Yeah. But it never was clearly defined. It was amorphous.
From a gold standard to a petrodollar black gold standard. Something like that, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we were sending plane loads of gold over to Saudi Arabia. France was sending warships to the New York harbors to convert their dollars into gold. We had something like 18,000 metric tons of gold at the end of World War II. We whittled that down to like 8,000. We have 8,100 metric tons now. And so the system just got untenable, broke down. And the Saudis really didn't want to take, you know, the treasury bonds, right? They liked their gold, and that's why we had the oil crisis, because they you know, they weren't going to send us the gold. And I think it was Nixon, it might have been Carter, but one of those presidents. I mean, they had the DOD, the Department of Defense, start drawing up invasion plans for Saudi Arabia. Wow! And it was put to them, you know, plomo or plata, like you're giving us the oil and taking our T-bonds, or we're coming in. And that's actually known as the Carter Doctrine, which is that oil security, energy security for the United States is a justifiable reason to employ the United States military. You know, Jimmy Carter just passed. I mean, that was one of his most well-known things at the time, the Carter Doctrine. So this has been the situation at play, where the U.S. has been able to, through whether threat of force or, you know, at one point in time, treasury bonds were paying a good yield, actually, because the Saudis were getting like 10%, and there might have been like 6 or 7% inflation, you know, when we had those really high rates in the 80s. But as the real yield on those bonds, which we talked about earlier, there's no real yield to them because of the inflation. And just to be clear, like, economists will say there's a real yield because CPI is like 3.5% or 3% or 2.8, and the yield's 4 or 4.25 or whatever it is. But the CPI numbers are all juice. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if a brand new home in San Francisco costs, you know, like $18,000 in 1971, and you adjust that what's $18,000 adjusted by CPI inflation today? Like $180,000. A new home in San Francisco doesn't cost $180,000.
Costs probably 10x that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So those CPI numbers are bogus. So in order to get a real yield, what did people start doing? Right, the BRICS countries started buying gold. You know, going into the London market, going into the New York, and into the COMEX, taking physical delivery, and putting in place like a new monetary system. And so the Western economies have been hesitant to do that because it's an admittance of the weakness of the dollar system. And once you start saying like, oh, we're going to start buying gold again, you know, like why is the U.S. You're the U.S. Why are you buying gold? So I think that in Scott Bessent in a Manhattan Institute interview, he said, this was before he was nominated Treasury Secretary, said, I think we're going to need a new Bretton Woods, a new global economic reordering in the next 4 years, and I want to be a part of it. So he said he wants to be a part of it. He said it's coming. And I think that, you know, everybody's known this has been happening. It's just the quiet part people aren't saying out loud. And that they're starting to say it a little bit out loud, and that we could see in the next few years, you know, the out loud just get explicitly stated. Like we're revaluing the dollar. We're going to back it with a sovereign wealth fund, which is going to include things like gold or Bitcoin. We're going to have, you know, something that, you know, something that's a more of a neutral reserve asset behind the scenes. I think we've already got that with Bitcoin, but you know, the government's got to co-opt. It got to bring things into play in order to also keep those reins of control and power over us. And so they're going to try to reorder and rejigger the system once again.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.